thing. Okay, you go. You're all set whenever you want to start.
Mr. Chase and Mr. Wood, do you guys want to open your meeting first, or do you want us to?
That's fine, we can do that. Good evening, all. Today is May 11th, and we are about to open a joint meeting of the Community and Economic Development Committee together with the Planning Board. I am Fred Chase. I am a member of the Community and Economic Development Committee, as is Councilor Bill Wood, who is present here this evening. There are two of us. We're awaiting the arrival of a third member, but nonetheless, we do have presently a quorum for the conduct of business. So I will declare our meeting open.
Okay, and I will, excuse me, having quorum and being 6:30 on May 11th, 2022, I'll open the planning board meeting for this evening. We're still operating under the remote guidelines per direction of the town manager. So this evening, there's no in-person attendance of members of the public, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access all the proceedings in real time. This meeting is being recorded, and within 48 hours, we'll post the link of the recording to the town's website and social media pages. I'm Patrick Driscoll, the chair. Mr. Raymond Ajemian is here with us this evening, and Ms. Astrid Rojas. Mr. McDonald may join us at some later point this evening. During the meeting, all votes will be taken as roll call. The following Bridgewater Town staff will also be participating remotely. We have Mr. Jennifer DeBobrian, the Community and Economic Development Director, and Mr. Shane O'Brien, the town planner. We also have Attorney Bobrowski joining us this evening. At this point, everybody's mics will be muted. They'll be unmuted. The board's mics will be unmuted through the whole meeting, and as items appear on the agenda, the project's representative. We don't have a project representative, but we have a public hearing this evening. If a project is a public hearing and allows for public comment, we ask when there is that public comment period that you either use the chat feature to ask your question by listing your name and address, and we will recognize you in order. The chair will recognize, or in this case, the host, Mrs. DeBobrian, will recognize all questions in order. You can also use the raise my hand feature if you'd like to participate in the participant menu, and you'll be unmuted when the host, Mrs. DeBobrian, recognizes you. Again, please state your name and address before asking a question. And if you're on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. I open the meeting. I will open our public hearing. The first item on the agenda, we have the public hearing. This is a joint meeting with the Town of Bridgewater Community and Economic Development Committee. This is for referral of zoning recodification ordinance FY 22021 with Attorney Mark Bobrowski. So the public meeting is open and the public hearing is now open.
So do you want me to just start, Pat, or?
Mr. Chase, are you okay with?
I'm certainly fine with that. Bill, do you concur?
So why don't we have staff and Attorney Bobrowski make a presentation? I think that's probably the best way to go.
Okay, so I'll just give sort of a brief introduction as to how we got to where we are. That's because we probably all know how we got to where we are, and then I'll let Attorney Bobrowski give any, presentation that he may have, and then we can open it up to questions. As you know, we've been working on the zoning ordinance recodification for, probably close to 3 years now, I would say. We're on draft, I think 16 or 17. We've workshopped this final draft with this group particularly, I think at least 3 times in public, and have had multiple iterations and comments and changes made based on your comments and input. I think we have come to a version that everybody concurs is worthy of moving forward at this time, to a point to at least get our zoning to a point where it is organized, legal, and can address the things we need to address in the immediate. And then we will move on from there, and over the next few years or so, in conjunction with our hopefully soon to be newly adopted master plan, make additional changes that have also been discussed throughout this process too. But this version is strictly a reorganization, a cleanup. It makes things consistent with state law and federal law, and makes, some minor changes to make things more coherent and consistent with how we practice. And so that's sort of where we're at. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or have anything else to say.
No, it's been my pleasure to wade through 16 drafts of this with you. I found out this morning that I'm positive for COVID, so my head is sort of in a fog. I'm just now starting to take the 5-day drug path. So I'm going to do this quicker than I might normally, and I'm sure you'll understand.
So I don't know if you guys, I'm not sure if we need to go, section by section like we've done in the past, or if you want to.
Why don't I just hit the highlights here? So section 1, as we've said on a number of occasions, is essentially the opening salvo of the ordinance. It's handshake, really. It just lays out basic rules on statutory interpretation. Purpose and authority are cited. The amendment procedure, which is something that you had pretty much already in your ordinance, has just been moved over and renumbered. Section 1 is really very little law and just a way of moving into the subject matter. Section 2 is division of your town property into districts. I don't think we added anything in terms of districts. So there's nothing new in that regard. We did add a couple of provisions having to do with split lots. Overlay districts now have a separate call out. So floodplain, aquifer, Bedford Street. We did at one point have a planned development district, but the new version of that was pulled back out and the old version of that was put back in. I want to urge you to remember that we had something I thought was pretty exciting called the Innovation District, because we didn't want to have 2 planned development districts. But I'd like you to take a look at that as you enter into the next phase of your work. I have passed something very similar in Haverhill, and over the course of the last year and a half, they've now approved 3 big projects that are going to bring life back to the city, all under the planned development district approach. So just keep that in the back of your minds. Use regulations. The principal accomplishment here was to set up a table of use regulations that is a modernization and an improvement over what you have already. It speaks for itself. I think probably most of the effort was on statutory protection under Chapter 48, Section 3, getting the language correct, making sure that it matched up with the statute. We did do a little bit of work on accessory uses, principally home occupations, I should say. Home occupations now are either as of right, where there's no clients or customers coming to the house and there is no non-resident employee, or special permit where any one of those 3 things are happening. If you are having non-resident employees, we decided on a limit of 2. In Section 4, on dimensional regulations, again, there is a table of dimensional requirements that simplifies things. Most of these regulations did not change. So there are some, I think the new regulations have to do with things like accessory structures. Building inspector commissioner was very active in helping us with that. A lot of this reflects his opinion on where we should go. Section 5 is a complete rewrite of the non-conforming uses and structures section. It basically recognizes that the statute divides nonconformities into 3 different categories: uses, structures, and non-conforming single and 2-family homes. Probably the biggest change is on single and 2-family residential structures. We've created a carve-out system that allows somebody to get a building permit if what they're going to do does not create a new or increase the non-conforming nature of the structure. Those are the words of the statute for single or two-family homes. We also created a new section on how to do tear downs, a trend that really is sweeping the Commonwealth here. So there are rules on tear downs. If you're going to knock it down, you have to put it back on the same footprint and in the same GFA, and then you can do that as of right, or if you move the footprint or you increase the GFA, then you have to get a special permit. So that allows the ZBA to fit the new non-conforming rebuild into the neighborhood. Section 6, parking and loading. These are general regulations. For the most part, we didn't change any of this. We simply moved these topics together in the same chapter. So parking, signs. Signs hasn't been changed. I think I might have taken out your political sign provision, which basically called for people to take signs down after a certain time after the election. And then performance standards for larger projects. So these are fairly new. I would say this is one of the major changes in the ordinance.
Could I ask a quick question here?
Sure.
I'm not sure whether I've done this, asked this before, but if I did, I apologize. But how do we define larger projects?
I think that there's a definition in the introductory clauses there.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, so it says, it should say that. So look at 6.3.2. Applicants for special permit or site plan approval for non-residential or multifamily uses shall comply. Non-residential or multifamily shall mean any use other than a single or a two-family dwelling. So it's basically covering anything larger than that. A three-family dwelling, anything commercial, anything mixed use.
Well, I guess my question was under the 6.3.1, the lighting. I'm still not sure the lighting is applying to the. I mean, I don't see an actual definition of a larger project. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, that's the definition right there. The first section, 6.3.1 A through G, is really just a statement of purpose. That's all. And then each of those sections, from lighting all the way down to fiscal impact, are dealt with in more detail as you move through the ordinance. And 6.3.2 is meant to trigger all this by saying, here's when it applies. So what you're doing is you're telling people in the business of private business that they have to go along with these regulations. Now, there are waivers that can be granted, and I would assume that many times waivers will be sought. I work with the small town of Berkeley up the road from you, and much to my surprise, they actually took the time to do development standards for the GB and SB districts. And it's a beautiful little booklet that's got 35 pages in it. One of the problems is that whenever somebody comes in to do something, they tend to ask for blanket waivers, and the board rarely talks about it. So if you're going to have these performance standards, I think everybody should itemize the waivers that they want, and you should talk about that very clearly with them as to what you're going to grant by waiver and what you're not.
Well, maybe you can explain to me, how does this pertain to two different commercial buildings, one a certain size, another one much larger?
There's no minor major distinction here. So if a building is a Starbucks with 1,500 square feet, or if it's a Rite Aid with 18,000 square feet, these are the performance standards.
All right.
Now, you can tailor the performance standards by having the developer ask for specific waivers. But again, I would, just in terms of down the road, how to handle those requests, I would say under 6.3.5, give us a specific list of waivers. We'll treat them one at a time, see where we want to go.
No, that's fine with me. I was just confused that it may distinguish between two different size buildings when you use the word larger, that's all.
No, well, I guess the context is that it's larger than a single or a two family.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You bet. So these are pretty powerful in terms of what they regulate and how they regulate it. I think this is, in all likelihood, going to help the board to have some standards to apply instead of minimize this or maximize that. You've actually got some standards that that quantify what you should be thinking about. I urge you to use this tool to your best advantage. All of these provisions in 6, including 6.4 on landscaping and screening, at the end have a provision that says special permit or waiver. But they all basically say that if the developer thinks that your standards are too draconian, perhaps as applied, because their property is unique, then they can ask you for a special permit, and you can let them have fewer parking spaces, for example, or bigger signs, for example, upon a finding that there's no substantial detriment will result. And I think that's a whole better way to do it than asking the developer to come forward with a variance request. A variance, as you know, is predicated upon shape, soil conditions, or topography. And that's not often the reason that they want relief. They may, when I first started doing this, I was helping the town of Holbrook up the road from you. And a guy came in right on the Randolph line, and he wanted to have fewer than the 40 spaces that the bylaw required for a 5-bay auto repair garage. And the board thought that was fine. So they gave him a special permit. It was already in the bylaw. And he built something that was more suited to what his career plans were. All right, section 7 is special regulations. So adult entertainment is obviously something that needs its own section. Common driveways is what you already have. Hotels, motels, what you already have. Medical marijuana and adult use marijuana establishments are things that we've put in here based on what you had. I want to say a couple of words about solar. The last time I met with you, I did not know that the SJC took a case from Waltham, Tracer Lane, on direct appellate review. The case was argued on March 8th. I was at the Sharon Town meeting the other night. One of the lawyers came up, introduced himself, and told me war stories. So we're going to find out. There's 4 cases out of the land court that say these are supposed to be treated like churches, schools, childcare centers. We're going to find out shortly, I would think, since March 8th was now 3 months ago, 2 months ago, that what the SJC's thinking is here. Now, you don't have to submit your bylaw to the Attorney General's office, but Wareham did just recently, and the Attorney General struck the bylaw. And so she's waiting too, to try to figure out what comes next. Just a word of caution. I don't think, for example, what I see in the cards here, the tea leaves, I don't see that large scale ground mounted solar is going to be restricted only to industrial districts. I think it's going to be allowed townwide everywhere by site plan review. That was Judge Spicer's thinking in the Tracer Lane case. So we'll see if I'm right. Nobody knows. Section 8 has a number of things from your existing bylaw: live work, retreat lots, open space conservation development. We had toyed with.
Mark, excuse me, just to, not a question on anything other than just like Scribner's errors.
Yeah.
8.3, you have a note in there. Can you go to 8.3?
Looking at it.
You mentioned open space. That is removed. That we decided not to do the flexible development at this point.
Yeah.
In the version that the council is going to vote on, that yellow and red has already been removed. Is that correct?
I think so, yeah. If you want to, I mean, let's hold Scrivener's errors to later emails so that I can make it through this before I pass out. But if you send me Scrivener's errors tomorrow, I'll make the changes.
I'll mention them, but we can have planning sent them to.
Yeah. Okay, I probably just forgot to take that out. So live, work, bed and breakfast is new, mobile home elderly community is existing. Senior housing is new.
Yeah, Mark, not a scrivener's error, but more of like a policy thing we talked about. On 8.6.4, number 10.
Yep.
Wait, because you said you're in senior housing, I just think we're behind it. Number 10. Number 10. So right, number 10 to go up. So see where it says the required, we don't have to remove this. We talked about removing it, but it says common open space. In the residence district, there shall be an area of common open space equal to the required, the required in the district, which is the facility is located, or 10%, which is ever greater. I
Yeah,
thought we said in all districts, it would just match up with the requirement of that district.
okay.
That's what I had in my note, because we talked about with no place in town do we have a 10% requirement. And in some commercial districts, we have a higher open space requirement than residential. So what I had written down here was, in each zoning district, there shall be an area of common open space equal to that required in the district. And somehow this ended back up in there.
Okay. Well,
So in all districts, there shall be an area of common open space equal to that required in the district. Period.
okay. Somehow Jen and I missed it. Yeah, so it says equal to that required in the district in which the facility is located.
But it just says residential districts, but we're also allowing it in commercial districts. So it should say in all districts.
Ah, I see. Okay, no problem.
Because we changed it to allow it across the board.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. No problem. Okay. Special district regulations, we've got floodplain, aquifer protection. None of these changed in any great way. Here's the old plan development district. The Bedford Street overlay district is 9.3. I think mixed use in the CBD is 9.6.
So I have a comment on that too. 9.6.7.
Yeah,
Last sentence got deleted. We added it at our workshop, and then it got deleted somehow.
I mean,
So it should say for a mixed-use development in the central business district, a maximum of 27 bedrooms per acre are permitted. That's 1.5 times 18, regardless of configuration. However, if density bonuses are permitted, the board may allow up to 39 bedrooms per acre.
okay, so the numbers are reversed. It should be,
Well, the 27 is missing altogether.
yeah, so the maximum of up to 27 bedrooms in the first number, and then the planning board may allow for density bonuses up to what?
25 units, 26 units per acre with, but that, so what we tried to do is that 1.5 needs to carry through. So we allow basically we allow up to 27 units per acre, which is a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
But, you know, and when we drafted this mixed use ordinance, we didn't account bedrooms for bonuses. So what we had written was for a mixed use development in the central business district, a maximum of up to 27 bedrooms per acre are permitted regardless of configuration. However, if density bonuses are granted, up to 39 bedrooms per acre may be permitted.
Okay. We'll fix that. I know that I was chasing that around in the old CBD language. I'm just scrolling down here. Elm Retail Overlay District is simply a reference to medical marijuana. That's really, I think, all that it was set up for, but there was nothing really this clear before, so I just added that. In the Administration and Enforcement, Section 10, these are pretty straightforward. Planning Board gets a section finally. Special permit criteria in 10.5.2 have been rewritten to provide you the best possible tools when you're looking at a special permit. Site plan approval has been fixed to match what the statute expects, giving you a direct appeal of a site plan decision to Superior or Land Court now, instead of being susceptible to be appealed to the ZBA, which is not an appropriate way to do it, in my opinion. And there's a new lapse provision as well. Section 10.7 is site plan review for Dover uses. It applies to only B1, B2, and B3 in the table of use regulations. You might want to think about adding B something else, solar energy systems, when and if the SJC comes down the way I think they will, because this would be a valuable way of doing it. And then there's a final provision here, which is a request for reasonable accommodation. This has principally to do with drug and alcohol recovery programs that are protected by the ADA and the Federal Fair Housing Act amendments of 1988. Then lastly, we've got definitions.
Does anybody on either the planning board or the CEDC have any questions for Mr. Attorney Borowski?
Not at this point.
Jen, you taking notes?
I am taking notes.
Excellent.
So the use table will be advertised as well. I mean, I know there's some changes.
Yeah.
to the use table.
Yep.
Do we have that this evening? Do we want to go over that?
Yep. I don't think there was, I mean, there hasn't been any changes since January on that one, which was one of our last workshops, but I can certainly bring it up for you. Give me 1 second. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a specific question, Pat, or?
No, I just wanted for the benefit of the public so they could see how we changed special permits to either BA or PB. So that means they go to planning board of appeals. So instead of saying SP, it goes. We also added the parking code.
Correct.
We cleaned up some of the language. So I wanted people to see the benefit we, just for public benefit that we can, the parking code's been added and some things have been cleaned up to BA and PB, and
Yep.
we added senior housing facility as opposed to like nursing and convalescent homes and things like that.
Yep.
One of my 55 and older developers told me that he's now looking for any new project to have the restriction for only 5 years or so, because he's done the math and the baby boom ends in 1965, which means that their youngest members are now 57. And there's kind of a hole in the demography behind that. So just something to think about.
Pat, I don't know if nobody has questions, if you want to open it up to the public.
Other board questions from the planning board?
Are we looking for members of the public or board members?
Board members right now, and then we can open it. I don't know if Mr. Columbotus, Mr. Wood, or Mr. Chase have any comments.
I don't have any questions yet.
I'm good. So if those little things, Jennifer, get added in, when we get it back to council, assuming this goes that path, which I think it will, but we'll have to make the amendments to the actual item that was submitted. So
Yes.
pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I would advise you to do that as a floor amendment sheet. They're not going to be big changes. It won't even take up a whole page, but at least the audience will have something to compare it to, the base version that we just used, and then the changes to the base version. I got into a little bit of Donnybrook and Sharon when I was there a couple of weeks ago passing the recodification, where the recommendation was to just say, and fix any typos that we find. Well, I mean, I get it. That's
We don't do that here.
quick and dirty way to do it, but how do they know what we're changing?
Fred's in charge, so he'll take care of it.
Yeah. So I prefer to do it, and I argued that we should do it as an itemized sheet of floor changes. So.
If I may, Attorney Bobrowski, if I could, I promise I will not reiterate my basic objection to the siting of large-scale solar in residential areas, but I do have a question concerning large-scale solar. One of the pre-existing provisions that has been struck was the limitation that required that a special permit be actually that a solar development actually be built pursuant to a special permit within a 2-year period, or the special permit would lapse. And I'm not sure I understand the rationale for having removed that restriction.
It's in the basic provision on special permits, the generic special permit section.
Okay, so just a matter of keeping it consistent with all other special permits.
Yeah, I didn't feel the need to repeat it again and again. So
Okay.
it's always in the, I always move it just to say it once, it's in the generic section. I think it's 10 point, toward the end, 10.7 or 8.
Okay, thank you.
Attorney Reverse, that's state law anyway, right? Special
Yep.
permits, 2 years.
Yep. Section 9.
If the CED is okay with it, we can open it up to the public now. This is the board grant.
I don't have anybody on my screen. Shane, do you have anybody on your screen?
I have one hand raised. And I also had Carlton requested to talk as well. So whichever.
One thing we should note is Mrs. Ramadada did submit a letter, and I had read it a couple of days ago in regards to the zoning. And
we didn't receive that in the office.
it was at our last workshop, I believe. But in one of her, and I don't want to speak for her, but one of her comments was on the open space community development. But the question referenced our existing language, and just so we're clear with everybody, we're not. I think that's going to be in phase 2, changing that, Mrs. DeBogrand.
Yes.
So we have a draft of what we'd like to replace it with that we've looked at, but it has to go through the process. So I think the question was on something that's already adopted. So, but I'm sure she could ask that question again if she wants to.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I guess Pat Neary and Carlton Hunt, so we could pick Pat.
So I'll speak up first if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak and having this hearing. I have probably 4 or 5 comments, but they're focused. First thing is, there are a lot of major policy changes in this document, which is not what was advertised initially. I don't have a major problem with most of those, but I will look forward to the comparative thing that goes before the town council showing what was removed, changed, modified, or however. That table is an absolute must. So that's my first comment. My second comment is, I submit one of the major policy changes has to do with the gateway districts. The gateway district, section 9.8.9, has entirely been removed from this document. And I was told at a public meeting that it was in the drawer. I find that an unacceptable answer. And I also find it unacceptable that's been removed. We worked too hard back in 2005 to get not only a design guideline into the zoning, but we also worked hard to get a design review committee into the zoning. And that is still in play until this gets removed. So my request is to return that section in its total to this document now, or find another way that we can readdress it so that it can be put back into the zoning. I also had a comment on the section that's been removed that the chair of the committee mentioned, that it has to do with the how we develop open space for housing and that kind of thing. Well, my request is very simple. I request that if my request is not honored, that we have some kind of ad hoc committee reporting to the chair of the planning board that would actually work to get the gateway district zoning back in. I also would request that that gateway districts be made an overlay as it was originally intended. Unfortunately, language got screwed up. I do have a letter to the Board of Selectmen from the old Master Plan Implementation Committee saying it was an overlay district, not a full district. So I would request that we have some kind of activity sooner rather than later to in fact get this corrected in this current zoning submission. There are lots of good changes, I will say to that, but there are too many major changes. As to the solar, I agree. I've had conversations with Mr. Chase, and I think there are good solutions. I hope it's by special permission or special permit rather than as of right. That, as of right would not serve the town well. Those are my major comments. I think I look forward to seeing this go forward to the town council, but during their process, I would hope that some of these things that I'm speaking to would be added back in as per the original intent of the zoning visit. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mrs. Neary?
Thank you, Pat Neary, Lakeside Drive. I just have one question. Is this version on the CED site so that we can review it?
Yes, it's been there for 2 weeks.
And I agree with Carlton about, the comparison. That's really important to show what was originally there and what we're hoping to do now. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised.
I do not see any either. Oh, we have Melissa Remendetta.
Hi, good evening. I just had a quick question, as Pat had said about the documents being online. Will the tables also be put online? I couldn't find those.
They are online, I believe.
I didn't see them. What page would they be within that?
Hold on.
What is it, 100 and?
They're separate documents. So if you go to the Economic Development and Planning page of the CED website under zoning recodification, there's a table of uses and a table of dimensional regulations. They're two separate documents listed right there.
So it's the Economic.
Development and Planning webpage.
Yep.
And about halfway down, there's a whole section on zoning recodification. And it has all the drafts back to draft 13, plus the tables.
Yep, I placed that in the chat as well. If anyone would
thank
like
you.
to click the hyperlink.
Terrific. Thanks very much.
See anybody else?
Do not see anyone else.
So Mr. DeMorgan, I do agree with Dr. Hunt in that it'd be nice to have design review for that gateway.
Mhm.
So is that something we can commit to for round 2?
Absolutely.
Maybe tighten up the guide, because I think if I recall, the guidelines were kind of, they weren't clear, and there was a design review committee that had a landscape architect, a planning board member, an engineer, and was kind of an ad hoc committee to the planning board.
Right.
So,
And since I've been employed by the town of Bridgewater, we have not had members on that committee. So it has not existed as far as I know.
so in the interim, maybe the planning board can try to shape those projects, but it'd be nice to get a committee for that gateway district.
Absolutely. I'm happy to work on that. I have a sample design review language, and I can pull what was previously in the gateway.
Are there any other board or public comments?
Dr. Hunt has his hand raised again.
Yes, thank you for agreeing to take action soon on my comment and my need and desire to have the Gateway District back in. That actually is the 9 pages of detailed design review guidelines that was developed by a committee that included a planner, et cetera, back in 2005 or 6. I think it is very clear what we're trying to do. And I would also ask that that committee look at the fact that it should be an overlay district, because the business district extends further back than 200 feet. And we intended only to protect the front half of those properties. Thank you.
Maybe somebody could explain to me why it was taken out in the first place.
I believe it was taken out because we didn't have a committee. It didn't make sense to keep something in that we didn't utilize.
If I might speak to that, please, Pat.
Yep.
That was not designed to be a standing committee. It was designed to be a committee that was to respond on a project by project basis, not a permanent committee, but an ad hoc committee. If the language is not clear about that, that was the full intent, that it would be appointed and only serve for those special needs that came before the gateway districts. Thank you.
I mean, again, I understand how this is going to move forward, but I'm still curious as to why it was dropped in the first place.
Because it was regulations that we couldn't enact because we didn't have the way. I understand what Dr. Hunt is saying about it was the way it was intended, but the way it was written and interpreted by the zoning enforcement officer and myself is that you needed to have a formal committee to do the design review for these projects, which the town does not have. So you can't enact these regulations without this committee. So the thought process was take it out so that we're not putting some burden on applicants in these districts that they can't meet. And then to Pat's point, at a later date, we will work on a design review process that we can make applicants adhere to.
So Diana, is
So
Dr.
Jen, you're saying there was no standing permit granting authority to administer the,
Correct.
right?
So can with Dr. Hunt, are you referring to section 3.34?
I believe that's correct. It actually said it was an advisory committee, not a regulatory committee, but it was advisory to the planning board. It's very specific on what its intent was.
Right, so it says to help facilitate the goal of maintaining traditional New England architecture, all projects subject to the review of the planning board and the gateway business district shall seek an opinion of the design review committee or an appropriate qualified reviewer as appointed by the planning board, known as the architectural reviewer. So as to any style of the structure, how it fits with historic character, it is encouraged that the proponent shall work with the architectural reviewer in the development of any plan. The opinion shall be delivered to the planning board and shall be weighted heavily in the decisions. In addition to parking incentives, those projects that satisfy the recommendations. But it talks about protective buffers, sidewalks, lighting, signage, general design standards, building signs. And that's 3.34 and it ends at 3.35.
Right, but then if you look at section on the old section under our existing zoning under 9893, it talks about the design review committee, and it specifically lays out who has to be on that committee and what their role is, and that's what we didn't have. We don't have.
Again, I'm going to, that's fine. We can fix that. We can deal with that. But I will point out that 3 projects have gone through design review under that ordinance. And they have contributed as we intended to the gateway district on the west side of town. So it's not that it hasn't been used. It's just that it's not codified in the way certain individuals think it should be. So we can fix that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
But
not
Jennifer,
sure.
in order to reinstate this language for the gateway, you think we need to establish a standing committee, right?
No, well, yeah, I mean, typically that's how design review is done. You have a design review committee. They can be advisory to the planning board. I've worked in plenty of places where they are, and that's fine. But I mean, if you look at the makeup of the committee as defined in our existing zoning, it's a chair or designee from the planning board. Okay, chair or designee from the ZBA, fine. Chair or designee from the master plan implementation committee. I don't believe that committee exists anymore. So how do we deal with that? Retailer doing business in Bridgewater, quote, in parentheses, Bridgewater resident. So does the retailer doing business in Bridgewater have to be a Bridgewater resident? It's just not
That's what it
clear
said.
to me how you make this committee up.
It's easy.
Can I throw in my 2 cents?
Sure.
I think professional design review is more valuable than layperson design review. There's nothing to stop you today on a project from hiring an architect or a landscape architect and to pay that person using the developer's money to make the project even better than it would be. And I think the results, my experience is that those results are better.
I hear that. Excuse me, there was silence. So I hear that. But the fact of the matter is that we have guidelines and we need to address this. This is the first time in 10 years that I've heard someone have objections to what our zoning is.
Well, it's not going to be added in tonight because it can't be. It's not in the work that came from the town council. So it has to be round 2 regardless. So I like the idea of the professional. I'm not sure I like the idea of forcing a developer to pay a professional for services they've probably already rendered through their design process themselves, but it's got to be round 2 at this point.
Attorney Bobrowski, I'm trying to compare these requirements to our site standards now anyway. Other than the building facade, it seems like we pick up a lot of these in the site standards.
Yep.
In our site plan review, the lighting, the buffers, the landscaping,
Sure.
requiring the landscape plan.
Yeah.
I
mean, I have a prejudice, and I'm not going to hide it, against committee-driven design review. Right now, my client in Andover, who's building a detox facility using the finest architect in Boston who does detox facilities, is at the design review in Andover, trying to wrap up the planning board meeting, and they have to make their recommendation. So I frankly, we had to go, so we went.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely should have design review coming, for that gateway into town. I mean, we want it to be attractive, but.
Yeah. Well, whenever I do a 40B and I sit with a board and the applicant gives me a suspect proposal, the first person I call is Cliff Bomer at Davis Square Architects up in Somerville. He comes to the meetings after that, works with the board, and he makes the project better. And I think the developers would say he makes the project better.
May I speak to that?
Go ahead, Doc.
I don't believe personal opinions belong in this conversation. I believe that the town has to make the statement as to what they want. I understand the feeling, the direction that the good attorney is going. But the fact of the matter is, we worked hard with limited resources 10 years ago to get this in play. It's the only design review guidance we truly have in the town of Bridgewater. If we want to go further, we can also ask that the Watertown Design Review Guidelines be incorporated into some of the other sections. This is the most amazing piece of clarity that I've ever seen in terms of design review and what it should look like. So I'm not going to stop arguing. Well, I'll stop arguing, but I look forward to this summer's implementation of a review committee to get this to go forward in a good way. Thank you.
So just so we don't keep beating a dead horse, maybe Mr. Tate, Mr. Wood, or Mr. Columbotus would sponsor putting this back in after we do this right away, and we can have staff amend it so it's compliant, just so we can move on this evening.
And first, we need to have the design review committee as a formal standing committee, as Ms. Burke suggested.
Okay.
I mean, to have legislation and to not.
I don't want
have
to.
it.
Right. I don't want to argue over language that isn't in the draft that we're supposed to be focused on. But from the description that was read, that Pat read, it sounded like that was the construction of the committee. Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean you can't create one if you have the language in the code, right?
Yeah.
I think as another discussion, I like the Watertown view. The gateway pieces really do need to have, a consistent design. We could probably articulate some of that directly. Planning board ultimately makes a choice under, their actions, and advisory, whether it's a committee or a professional, is a conversation I think that we could have. But we can't, as I said earlier, we can't solve it tonight. So if we want to move this back and have it voted on council, we have to decide on the piece that came down.
Attorney Bobrowski, is there anything that prevents the planning board in the interim before we have a design review? I think you already answered the question, but I just want to be clear. From hiring an outside architect to review the plan as part of site plan review in the Gateway Business District? Is that legal?
Of course, you just fall back on chapter 44, section 53G, which I'm sure you use.
Okay, thank you. Any other board or participant comments? Questions? Do we want to close the public hearings on either side, Mr. Columbus?
Pardon me?
If there's no
What was
more,
that, Pat?
if there's no more public comment or no more board questions, do we want to
Yeah.
entertain to close the public hearing?
Yeah, I think we.
I apologize. Is Mr. Chase now the chair or are you still the chair, Pete?
No, Peter remains chair.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm still there. Do we have any more?
I don't
Bill,
see any more.
Fred?
I do not.
Bill, do you have any more comments or questions?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we might as well close the public hearing. We need a vote. All in favor of closing the public hearing? Bill and Fred?
Aye.
Fred, Bill, are you an aye?
Yeah, I'm an aye.
I'm an aye.
I think you can record it as a roll call because you have to do that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so on the planning board side, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
By Mr. Jemian, do we have a second?
A second.
And Mr. McDonald? Okay, I'll take the roll. Is Ashley still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I vote yes.
Ms. Rojas?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, I just couldn't find you, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was looking for your video and then you went to Ms. Rojas?
I vote yes.
Okay. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
So does planning board want to make a recommendation back to the council?
Do we have a motion on the zoning recodification?
I'll make the motion that the document that we discussed tonight be sent to the council.
With the changes Pat noted,
Excuse me, yes, with the changes that have been discussed.
Those are 8.3, 8.6.410, and 9.67.
yep, I have those.
Do a second.
A second.
Motion by Mr. Jemian, second by Mr. McDonald. Any discussion? Ms. Rojas?
No discussion here.
So voting, Ms. Rojas?
Yes, I said no discussion here.
Right, but he's
I'm
asking
taking
for your
the-
vote.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Ashton. I'm taking the roll call.
Okay, I vote yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Jemian,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Thank you all.
Okay, so
I'll coordinate with Jen and I look forward to getting over this COVID and seeing you under better circumstances.
Mark.
okay. So
I'll make the motion to recommend to the council
recommend passing.
with,
A point of order, if I may.
Sure.
We'd spoken earlier, partly in response to public comment about what I understood to be a cumulative document incorporating all of the changes from the original code to the new proposed recodification. So does that document exist?
Not to my knowledge.
So the council and the general public can do no more than compare the most recent draft that we're discussing tonight against the code as it actually stands in law today. Is that correct?
Yes, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drafts available on the website, the last 5 drafts, so you can see the iteration of changes. That way, most of them are redlined, so that you can see the changes versus the clean version on the website. So that's, you have that as well.
I think that's generally suitable for our purposes. I think it's a bit burdensome with respect to the general public to cause them to need to make that kind of a comparison. Is there?
I have a suggestion if I can interrupt.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Maybe you could ask I'm just joking, the council president to put on the agenda along with this item, a presentation, slideshow presentation outlining the major changes. I found the reason I say that is when I was going through it, trying to do a line by line, red line comparison, it was extremely difficult, even though the language didn't change in major paragraphs, but it was reorganized and, some of the things like definitions changed or were added, things like that to clean it up. So I think it would probably be extremely useful to have a presentation that went through the process and the major changes and the restructuring. And if there's any significant changes, which I don't think there are at this point, but and you could talk about the gateway issue that came up tonight, and make that presentation, as well as make it aware that the last copies are on the website.
Well, just in response to that, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but let me ask Jennifer, do you have material that would accomplish that? Would you be in a position to present a relatively high level overview of all of the substantive changes in the context of a council meeting?
Tonight, no, but when you had the council meeting, I probably could be. I could prepare myself enough to do that. At the moment, I'm not prepared to do that.
Yeah.
Understood.
I think that's an absolute need. It's laboursome to read through 115 pages and look for comparisons, but we absolutely have to present to the council and anyone else in the room, what the process has been and what the changes are. It's been a long journey to get here. I think we're there. In formality, it's a wholesale change for what we're adopting as a piece of legislation with the Scrivener errors and things that need to be amended. But it really is, lift and replace of code, even though in concept it's not a large change, even though some sections might look like they've changed. And so I think absolutely the council needs to have that presentation.
Yeah, I don't think that will be a problem.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. We can coordinate that offline.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, not to interrupt, but I think draft, I know there were some sections that were missing. I think the gateway and some mixed use sections were missing, but the mixed use ones have been added back in. But was draft 15, it was always represented, and this one has changed, this version has changed, that what was yellow was new, what was crossed out was removed, and what was left as black text was existing.
Correct.
Is there a way to just put that system into this draft 16 for the council so that we can, unless I printed it off wrong, but that yellow, that cross out, that's all been removed? Is there a way to resurrect that? And I think
I'd have to speak with Attorney Bobrowski. He right now, he's the holder of the master document. So I would speak, I believe he's already signed off, as he said he wasn't feeling well, so let me speak with him either tomorrow or Friday when he's feeling a little bit better, and I'm sure we can come up with some
Yeah, I mean,
process that works.
I think that was very helpful, but then again, there were some sections that were missing that we identified. If we could point out, what's crossed out is obviously crossed out, which yellow is new, but then list the sections that have been removed, like.
Yep.
And that, I think that was very helpful for me, just following on. If it was black text, I kind of skimmed through it because I knew it existed. If
Right.
it was yellow, I concentrated on it because it was new. If it was crossed out, I looked at it to see what was crossed out and why. And then I just think that was very helpful. If we could, that might help your presentation if you could resurrect that and then list sections that are just missing from the document altogether, not crossed out, not in yellow, not in black text,
Right.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chase.
Oh, thank you very much. Peter, I think you were asking for a motion. Am I correct? Do we have a motion?
Yeah,
Okay, I would second that.
okay. Recommending passage to the full council
Recommending return to the council.
with a positive recommendation.
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. So that will be our recommendation.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you much. Have a great night.
Oh, you guys
should
all have to
we should
adjourn.
probably have to adjourn.
Yeah.
I'll make
thank
a
you.
motion for our committee to adjourn.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, that,
And so I will second that.
All in favor?
Bill's a yes. Fred's a yes. Peter, you,
Yes, I'm a yes.
I'm a yes.
okay, unanimous for adjournment.
Okay, thanks all.
All right, planning board.
Do we have a motion
So moved.
by Mr. McDonald? Do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Any discussion? Mr. Jimmy?
Yes.
Ms. Rojas?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank
night.
you.
Night, everyone.